Hi, welcome to Coffee and Conversation. I'm your host, Karim Rafa. I'm joined today by Francis Tan, investment strategist at UOB. Francis, thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. Can you tell me a bit more about what you do at UOB and how you came to be here today?
Well, I'm in UOB as an investment strategist. Basically, I serve a group of high net worth clients. And we know that we're looking at economics, usually it matters a lot onto the asset allocation choices of clients. So in the private bank, we will help the high net worth clients basically managing their portfolios, making decisions for them. Of course, centering around strategic asset allocation that has a long-term outlook. Basically, where do you want to go when you're retiring? How much do you want to spend every month when you're retired?
Before we get into the questions I have for you about the business cycle, can you tell me a bit more about yourself? Are you an economist, a macroeconomist at heart, or what's your personal direction?
Right, certainly. I'm trained economist. Well, of course, in Singapore, but I realized that I'm a strategist at heart. Now, there's a big difference between economists and strategists. I would like to explain here. Well, generally, an economist tends to explain what is happening out there. For example, the Fed is increasing interest rates. The economist goes one step further by explaining why is that happening. So you can say that, the Fed is increasing interest rates because there's some inflation in the US. However, the economists usually will just stop over there and they don't really tell you, so what should you do with your money? So as a strategist, you'll take one step further from what the economist has said, what's going on out there, why is it happening like that, so painting the story. But the next step will be critical to clients, especially the high net worth. So what should you do with your money? What should you do to your portfolio? Is that going to affect your portfolio decision, allocation for today, for this month, or for the rest of the year?
So for all the current news and all the current decisions, we talk to you.
Why not? Feel free to come to me.
We are in what I understand to be long overdue a recession. Can you elaborate on that for me?
That's right. Well, I guess we have heard of this for quite a while, that the business cycle usually is around 10 to 12 years. While back in the 80s, 1988, we had a recession, global recession. 98 was the Asian financial crisis. And then 10 years later, 2008, Lehman collapsed and we had the global financial crisis. And hey, this year is 2019. Supposed to have a crisis in 2018, but it's not there. So this time around, I would say that in the business cycle, technically, if you look at how history has repeated itself, we should be seeing a recession last year, 2018, but we are not. I'll be safe to say that we are somewhat in the middle towards the late stage of the business cycle. Don't worry, the recession is not going to come anytime soon because the central banks around the world today are very much different from the central banks before the 2008 global financial crisis, because right now they are a lot more data-centric, they are a lot more centric to what the market is telling them. So let's see what the market has to say. And of course, from now, we are seeing from the interest rate futures market, in fact, what the Fed is holding on right now in terms of holding standing pat with their monetary policy, the market is in fact even expecting a rate cut.
You did mention the Asian financial crisis in 98.
That's right.
And then the global financial crisis in 2007-8. Mm-hmm. Do you think that the reason why things are more centralized and pushing towards an elongated business cycle is also because globally we are unified in extending this business cycle?
I wouldn't say that the global business cycle is synchronized today. The US probably is in the middle to a later stage of the business cycle. Countries that are still cutting rates right now, they are earlier part in the business cycle. But that said, if the recession is to come, everyone will be facing that, because when the recession comes, consumers tighten their belts, businesses stop production.
Yeah, now more than ever.
Exactly. So that will affect everyone else.
Now, you did mention the lack of unification.
Yep.
The current trade war between the US, China, and all of the tension in the South China Sea.
That's right.
Can you tell me how that's been affecting things in Singapore, Asia, and globally?
We have seen production fragmentation on an enhanced mode. Well, production fragmentation is nothing new. While in the past, where countries are in differing comparative advantages, manufacturers will like to put different parts of their production chain in different countries whereby they can yield a comparative advantage. For instance, China 30 years ago, their comparative advantage was cheap, relatively unskilled labor, but cheap labor. So on our end, we see that the private sector, the production, the manufacturers, they are shifting inevitably because of the uncertainties of how long these trade tensions with the US will be. They are shifting some of their production down to many other countries, including where we are in right now in ASEAN, Southeast Asian countries. Vietnam has amazing, I would say, pretty skilled labor force right now that has over the past decade gone up the scale of manufacturing capabilities. Another thing that I'm seeing in China is that they are going up the manufacturing value chain. Right now, China, because of high labor costs and because of the trade tension with the US, they are no longer happy to be just doing production. Well, they can do that 30 years ago, but China is no longer happy doing that. China is shifting upstream, and they are coming up to the ranks of Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, Japan in R&D.
You're moving away from China being the place for cheap labor, and now it's becoming the place for good R&D and assembly, right?
Exactly, that's right.
Coming back to Singapore, away from China, our demographic is shifting somewhat.
That's right.
Can you tell me where you see it going from now on? What's coming for, say, more, I don't want to say advanced economies such as Singapore?
There seems to be a positive correlation that as an economy starts from the developing stage, while gathers some steam, encourages manufacturing as a share of GDP to go higher, like the Singapore case, and all the way towards higher economic development and becoming a developed status. There's this positive trend of higher GDP per capita and how society has gone into aging. So in this instance, we are not stranger to the fact that Japan is the world's oldest society, and Japan is an advanced economy. They have a big issue right now, is that their societies are all aging, and how are they going to, especially government, how are they going to balance the income or even wealth inequality going ahead for their populace? Back in 1980, the below 15 years old, we had around 25-26% of our resident population that are younger people. Exactly, in Singapore, below 15 years old, so very young population. We were able to attract lots of MNCs, lots of foreign investments into Singapore. And in the 80s, the above 65 years old, they were just less than 5% of our total population. While years of economic development has seen how our society have aged. While right now, as of 2018, the latest numbers, the below 15 years old, that's around 14.8%. So it dropped from 27% all the way down to 14.8%. And guess what? The above 65, the seniors, or we would like to call them the pioneer generation in Singapore, they have gone from just under 5% of our population in the 80s. Right now, they're 13.7%. Do you think that the two percentages will eventually touch each other and cross? They are tapering towards one another.
Well, they wouldn't cross.
They will cross. They will cross. Should the current total fertility rate in Singapore remain at the latest 1.14, then we will see the two lines cross, meaning the percentage of the older population will equal to the younger population. Actually, the next question is, when do you think it will cross?
That was exactly what I was going to ask you.
That's right. It will cross sometime this year.
So what are the steps a government, or from a macro level, one should take?
In 11 years' time, in 2030, the above 65, I will not be adding to it yet, but the above 65 will be around 27% of our resident population. To take some context of that, 27% is exactly what we are seeing in Japan today. In Japan today, the above 65s are exactly 27% of their population. Now that worries me a lot because it's only going to take 11 years for us to reach what Japan has today. We don't have a rural area in Singapore. Some people tell me it's Kranji. Some people tell me it's Johor Bahru, JB, but that's not Singapore.
That's not Singapore anymore.
So exactly, so we are going to have a much bigger problem. Imagine if you're a tourist coming to Singapore just 11 years later. You step out of the train, the subway, and you're going to look around you. It's going to be a different landscape, sight and scene than when you are in Tokyo today, even though we are like Japan, 27% of our population above 65. So that's exactly what's worrying me. To your question just now, you're mentioning, so what should our government and what should policymakers be looking at? The incumbent party has made a lot of good changes to the way of how Singapore is being run. I would say that they listen a lot more to the people. That's number one. Number two, you will see that since 2011 till today, in just 8 years, there has been a lot more infrastructure in Singapore, a lot more in housing, a lot more in the subway, the MRTs. What the policymakers will do right now is to turn the tap steadily in terms of introducing immigration into Singapore and making sure that they integrate into the society. At the end of the day, we are a city-state.
Francis, thank you so much for coming today. I'm afraid that's all the time we have. It's been great having you. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much.